think there's a potential for of Boston's best restaurants and purveyors.
Coming up on Boston Public Radio, Ask the Governor. Deval Patrick is here to take your questions at 877-301-8970. The phone lines will be open in just a few minutes. And there's heartbreaking news from the family of Martin Richard. We'll get the governor's reaction to that. Jim?
And we'll also get his reaction to the testimony of Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis before the House Homeland Security Committee this morning, what the commissioner knew and didn't know prior to the April 15th bombing. That and much more coming up next on Boston Public Radio.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The Cleveland man accused of holding 3 women in captivity for a decade has been arraigned. Bond was set at $8 million for Ariel Castro, who has been charged with rape and kidnapping. From member station WKSU, Kevin Niedermeyer has more.
Ariel Castro looked at the courtroom floor as Assistant Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Brian Murphy told the judge what police say Castro did to the hostages.
They withstood repeated beatings. They were bound and restrained and sexually assaulted, basically never free to leave this residence.
The prosecutor asked for bond to be set at $5 million, but instead the judge set bond at $2 million for each case, the 3 women and child freed on Monday. The case is being turned over to a county grand jury and more charges are expected. For NPR News, I'm Kevin Niedermeyer in Cleveland.
The body of suspected Boston Marathon bomber Tamerlan Tsarnaev has been buried. As NPR's Tovia Smith tells us, the location of the grave has not been disclosed.
Tsarnaev's remains had been in limbo for nearly a week at a Worcester funeral home that was unable to find any cemetery willing to take him. Authorities say a deal to bury Tsarnaev at a state prison fell through yesterday, and police pleaded for someone to offer a plot. "We are not barbarians," the police chief said. "We bury the dead." Police also complained they could no longer afford the heavy security around the funeral home. Now police say a, quote, courageous and compassionate individual provided what was needed to properly bury the deceased. They say Tsarnaev is now entombed. Police say the body is no longer in Worcester, but offer no further details. Tovia Smith, NPR News, Boston.
The first congressional hearing into the Boston Marathon bombings is underway. Lawmakers in the Republican-led House are examining the government's initial response and what the administration may have known about the Tsarnaev brothers before the April 15th attack that killed 3 and wounded more than 260. Weekly unemployment benefits are down again, this time by 4,000, pulling down the overall total last week to a seasonally adjusted 323,000 and a 5-year low. Economist Mark Zandi of Moody's Analytics says the numbers bode well for hiring.
Most industries are adding to payrolls, only a handful are not, and very few layoffs anywhere across the economy, across industries, most regions of the country. So it's pretty broad-based.
The Labor Department says the less volatile 4-week average also fell to 336,750, a level not seen since before the recession. At last check on Wall Street, Dow Jones Industrial Average down 2 points at 15,103. NASDAQ was up 3 at 3,416, and the S&P 500 down 3 at 1630. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon from the WGBH Radio Newsroom in Boston. I'm Marilyn Scherer with the local stories we're following. The Boston Police Commissioner testifying at a congressional hearing this morning says 3 city police officers were working with the U.S. Terrorism Task Force but didn't know about vague warnings of one of the bombing suspects nearly 2 years before the attacks. Commissioner Edward Davis says he would have liked to have known that Russian authorities had warned the FBI that Tamerlan Tsarnaev was a radical extremist before the April 15th attacks.
The help of the federal government was critical to our response here. We need to look at how it happened and why it happened, and we need to do everything we can to prevent it. But the truth of the matter is, nobody bats 1,000.
Davis said he can't say exactly what police would have done with that information. The chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee says it's still unclear whether the Boston bombings were foreign directed, but he says they were clearly, quote, foreign inspired. The chairman is Republican Mike McCall of Texas. McCall says he fears the Boston bombers may have succeeded because, quote, our system failed. McCall says the U.S. can and must do better. Meanwhile, police in Worcester say the body of Boston Marathon bombing suspect Tamerlan Tsarnaev has been buried outside of the city. Police said in a statement today that a courageous and compassionate individual came forward to properly bury the remains, which had been at a Worcester funeral home for about a week. Police did not disclose where the body was taken. Support for NPR comes from Zurich Insurance, providing risk management and insurance solutions to help businesses meet their ever-changing needs. Learn more at ZurichNA.com. In sports, the Boston Bruins now have a 3-1 lead in their playoff series against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Red Sox play again tonight against the Twins at 7:10. Showers this afternoon with a slight chance of thunderstorms, highs in the upper 60s. I'm Marilyn Sheriff. For more news, visit WGBHnews.org.
Hi, I'm Jim Browdy. She is Emily Rooney, sitting in for Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio on a day packed with marathon aftermath news. We're joined as we are once a month, every month, in the studio by the Governor of the Commonwealth. He'll take your questions at 877-301-8970. Governor Patrick, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Jim. And Emily, it's nice to see you.
Thank you,
I just
Governor.
want to point out, though, that you do not seem to dance with the music interlude the way
Marjorie does.
Maybe I wasn't in the mood today.
Yeah, she'll be happy to hear it.
Yeah.
Speaking of the mood, there's a statement from the Richard family out, the first statement, and you have it in front of you. You want to read a piece or two?
It really is heartbreaking. I don't even know if I'm going to get through it myself, but this is from the family of Martin Richard, the 8-year-old who was killed on Marathon Day. The mother was severely wounded, has lost sight in her eye. The little girl, 7 years old, was also wounded, and the father was wounded. And this is a statement from them. It's really the first time we've heard from them in over 3 weeks, and it starts like this. Last evening, just 23 days after the bombing attack on Boston, our 7-year-old daughter Jane underwent her 11th surgery. While she has more trips to the OR ahead of her, last night's operation marked an important milestone as doctors were finally able to close the wound created when the bomb took her left leg below the knee. Part of the procedure involved preparing Jane's injured leg to eventually be fitted for a prosthesis. Getting to this point has not been easy for Jane. In addition to all of the surgeries, she has also had to fight off infections and other complications. After not being able to communicate with Jane for the first 2 weeks, she woke up with difficult questions that needed to be answered. There are not words to describe how hard sharing this heartbreaking news was on all of us. She needed to know that her little brother had been killed.
You just saw this thing, too, a couple of minutes ago.
I did.
And you know
the family well.
I do. Not very well, but I've known them for many, many years. When I spoke to Bill the day, I think it was the day after the bombing, the dad, he reminded me that there was a photograph of Martin, I think then 3 years old, holding a campaign sign for our first campaign. I had a chance to visit.
For you? You're talking for you?
For me.
Oh.
Yeah. I visited with Bill and Denise a couple days after the bombing in the hospital, and Henry, who was their oldest son, is in many ways the hero here. I think his dad said he felt that Henry had saved Jane's life. I've been out to the school that Martin and Jane went to visit with the classmates and just to pay attention to them, make sure that they know we're paying attention and caring about them. And I think the family feels very much loved and cared about, but also trying to protect their privacy because, as they say in the statement here, there is no roadmap for this, and just trying to figure out how to manage your feelings, let alone all the medical issues. It's got to be profound.
I went down to Spalding Rehab earlier this week and spoke to a woman named Roseanne Sedoya, who also lost a leg, and many of the other victims.
After they tried to save it, I think.
No, this is a different woman.
Okay.
Completely different woman. Okay. She lost her leg from above the knee. She never had a chance with her leg. But it was the experience of just being there and seeing some of the other people around. Mrs. Corcoran was there. She's lost both legs, right up to the top of the thigh. And just the reality of, that these people are going to have to go on with the rest of their lives like this. And sort of things are starting to get back to normal for many other people. But it's just, it takes you back. And when you read a statement like this, you see how profoundly damaged and affected this family is going to be forever.
You visited a lot of the survivors, have you not?
I have. I've been to, I think, most of the hospitals and visited, and this was in the first couple of days, so some were ready for visitors, some were not. I spent a lot of time with the medical professionals who, it was interesting. On Tuesday, they were still running on adrenaline, exhausted, but running on adrenaline. And so, and mostly I just wanted to make sure that they knew I appreciated them too. On Wednesday, same message, but you could see they were coming off the adrenaline and they were dealing with their own issues, because many of them had seen things that they never imagined they would see. And so the care of all of the people affected and the recovery of all of the people affected continues. And I'll just say that I think in so many ways the best medical community in the world was even better in the wake of the bombing. I think the first people were in surgery within 20 minutes. No hospital was overwhelmed. They followed an emergency response plan that we had developed back in 2007. They had practiced it in the years since, and they, along with law enforcement, along with regular citizens, just stepped up. And I think in many respects, the remnant of this tragedy, but a shining one, is that we revealed ourselves to be a real community.
Speaking of stepping up, a part of the demonstration of real community is close to $30 million in the One Fund Boston that you and the mayor of Boston created. We spoke to Ken Feinberg here a couple of weeks ago. He's gone out of his way every single time, including these meetings Monday night and Tuesday morning at the Boston Public Library, to say it's not enough money. There have been the Prosthetics Association of America, it's not its name, but whatever it is donating prosthetics. Are you involved in any efforts to fill the holes that the One Fund Boston won't be filling?
You mean in terms of financial?
Yeah, well, whatever it is, or either contributions or in kind, like prosthetics. Is any of that stuff going on?
So I can, in my official capacity, thank people for their contributions, but I can't actually ask them I know that there's some conversation at the in the legislature about whether there's some appropriation to the fund, if there's some gap that can be filled. Of course, there are a number of insurance issues and claims that people have, but I think Ken's point goes beyond the tangible.
Yeah,
that for what amount of money can fill the gap in
this family.
Exactly, in the Richards family and so many others.
This morning, it's hard to transition from anything, but this is marathon related. The commissioner, Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis, testified before the House Homeland Security Committee, and he was asked by the chair from Texas whether or not his 4 Boston police officers, 3 detectives and a sergeant of the Joint Terrorism Task Force, were notified about the FBI's contact in the summer of 11 with Tamerlan Tsarnaev, and he said no. He says they received no word on that individual prior to the bombing. And then reading from the Globe account, asked by the chairman McCall if he would have liked to have known, Davis, of course, said yes, and asked if he had known whether Boston police would have given Tsarnaev a second look, and Davis responded, absolutely. Are you willing to entertain the notion, Governor, that if the intelligence agencies nationally had cooperated well with each other, and if they had shared information with Boston police and local FBI, that this thing could have been prevented?
No. Having been briefed thoroughly on the investigation and I believe on the intelligence, I don't think it was enough. I think the term is to be actionable, but obviously we wish that we had known. I think that what Commissioner Davis has said and others have said is if they had known what was knowable then, as opposed to what has since become known, it wouldn't have been really enough to go on. But still, you'd want to know.
But, the one thing that was mentioned when he said that, if we had known before, we would have absolutely taken a second look. Something that isn't actionable, to use your word. We've all read in the accounts about these outbursts that the older brother had at the mosque on Prospect Street in Cambridge. As a non-law enforcement person, I know you were obviously in the Justice Department, you know a lot more about this. It seems to me, if they're alerted by the FBI, this is a guy who the Russians are deeply concerned about, and we were, not enough to do more than question him and his family and friends. And then you stay on top of it. Find out there are these outbursts that were rather extreme. Isn't it conceivable there might have been some higher level of scrutiny?
Anything is conceivable. There've been outbursts by you on this program. Do we then have law enforcement follow you around? And there's a balance here to be struck. I'm not saying that the balance was struck the right way in this case. I'm simply saying that based on what I know, I think it's a matter of public record that there is more known and more that intelligence more that has been shared by overseas intelligence, foreign intelligence, since the bombing than before the bombing. Then it was pretty darn general. But yeah, I wish this had been. Of course, I wish that this had been prevented. But it's hard to tell from what was known whether that was enough.
One last question off the Davis testimony and interviews he gave before his testimony. He says that obviously the planning is already beginning for events like July 4th. I think you've mentioned this too, which was allegedly the original Tsarnaev target, and they decided they were far enough ahead with their bomb making they could do it earlier. He talks about more surveillance cameras in general, not just vis-a-vis July 4th, but all major public events in Boston. Where are we in terms of, to use the word preventing similar sort of circumstances prospectively?
So I think the two issues here, Jim, if I can separate.
Take anyone you want, sure.
Separate the two. The after every large civic gathering, they have whether it's the marathon or the 4th of July or what have you, the public safety folks do and I think it's called an after-event analysis. And they've done it after every marathon, for example, and they build on lessons learned and so on. Obviously, this one has a whole other sense of urgency because of the calamity of the bombings and those lessons, and some of that thinking all of that thinking is going into the preparation, for example, for the 4th of July down on the Esplanade. Once those plans are firmly in place, I'm sure that there'll be a public briefing about them, because we want these kinds of civic gatherings to happen. We just want them to be as safe as possible. And as Commissioner Davis said, I think in the clip you played, no law enforcement bats 1,000, but you want to bat as close to that as you can. The question about cameras has come up actually a couple of times, at least since I've been in this job, around traffic cameras, right, as a way to save money and frankly drive public safety around, running red lights and running stop signs and so forth. And there's a lot of pushback around it. It's interesting. I think
You're talking about cameras on the police cars that are for tagging?
No, I'm
plates?
talking about cameras on the light posts and so on that show. I mean, many states use this for ticketing. Yeah. So if you don't make a complete stop, you run a yellow light or something like that. It takes a picture of your license plate and sends you a ticket in the mail. The response to that idea here, which has been floated in a couple of cities in the Commonwealth, and I'm not sure, but maybe in Boston, I'm just not sure, actually seems to divide on generational lines. Isn't that interesting? People my age are really squeamish about it. Young people much less so, because they live in a much more, out there world, a Facebook world.
But one last thing about cameras. I don't think it's just I could be wrong about this, just the traffic light things. Weren't there some federal grants offered to cities to do more surveillance cameras in general? And my recollection, and I could be wrong too, is that Tammany was for them or against them and then for them. I think Cambridge actually may have rejected the money.
I don't know.
Okay, fine. Sorry. Our number is 877-301-8970. The governor's here for you. We have more questions too, but it's your turn. Governor, start it off.
Take it away.
Let's see. Michael is calling from Boston. Michael, you there?
Hello. My question is about thanks for having me on. My question is about the proposed tax increases that, to pay for mostly for the transportation infrastructure and all. I want to know why it's considered impossible or radioactive to raise the gas tax more than 3 cents when we're used to prices of gas going up 10 cents a week, sometimes 15 cents a week. And since so much of it is to pay for things that vehicles that use gasoline use, like bridges and roads and all, why such a small increase in that?
Well, you should ask the legislature. I mean, it was this is the House and the Senate proposal. I mean, I remember, you may remember that several years ago when I took the first run at a comprehensive fix for our transportation infrastructure, I proposed a much larger gas tax increase, and I had my head handed to me, and it didn't go anywhere. This time, we came back at it with the support, meaning comprehensive funding for transportation, with the support of legislative leadership and the general public. And the proposal I put on the table after talking with the legislative leadership about what not to propose, what sorts of things they didn't want to deal with, was a plan to cut the sales tax and raise the income tax. Which I thought was fair and progressive. I believe still is fair and progressive. And we went out and sold it. And actually, generally, the public supported it. Nobody likes new taxes, but they got that we needed a modern, up-to-date, safe transportation system and also investments in education for reasons of growing our economy and improving our quality of life. The legislature then went in the direction that you're talking about, Michael, the 3 cents a gallon gas tax. The House total bill was about at $500 million. The Senate bill appears to be at $800 million, and now they're trying to find common ground through conference. And where that lands, I don't know. But I think that if the Senate number is a real $800 million, that's a lot closer to the billion we were looking for transportation, and I think we can do some important things.
Thank you for your call. Governor, you mentioned the income tax thing. I'm sure you've seen this Chief Executive Magazine thing, which rates Boston, Massachusetts, 47th best place for business. And in part, when you read the story, one of the reasons for the rating is because of the income tax issue, which apparently is dead. Correct? Well, I guess the question: what was your response to that CEO Magazine thing?
Not much. I mean, we've got for every one of those, there are 3 surveys that say we're at or at the top or near the top in competitiveness, in entrepreneurialism, in best places to start and grow a company. They're going to be points of view frequently from well-paid CEOs that they'd rather not have an increase in the income tax. Now, it's important that we not be out of line, right? It's important we be competitive. And there was a term used in an article, I think it was in Commonwealth magazine, that described taxes in Massachusetts as stubbornly average for a long period of time. We've been right smack in the middle for many, many years, and with the proposal I made, we would have stayed right smack in the middle, but we would have invested in ways that I am certain accelerate our job growth.
Let's go back to the calls. Governor Deval Patrick with us till 1 o'clock at 877-301-8970. Governor.
Ralph is calling from Lancaster. Ralph, you there?
Hello, Governor.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good.
My question, why does Massachusetts law make it illegal for a small business like mine to purchase health care insurance for our employees? We have 10 employees.
Illegal?
From out of state, you mean?
Yeah, I will explain.
Yeah.
We have 10 employees.
Yeah.
More than half of them work outside of Massachusetts.
Gotcha.
And Massachusetts law, Chapter 176J, prohibits insurance companies from selling us health care insurance if more than half of our employees work outside of Mass.
Why?
That's my question. We have contacted our state representative.
Who's your state rep?
You would ask me.
I'm sorry. I should know, Ralph. I'm sorry. Never mind.
Harold Nodden.
Yeah.
And our state senator, who is Tilly Ryan. And Tilly was in contact with your healthcare insurance specialist, David Seltz, and nobody has been able to explain to us why this law is in place. And I've got to tell you, it has cost us an enormous amount of time trying to figure out how to provide health care insurance to our employees.
Where are your employees? What other states are your employees working in? Are they just over the line, or
we're a high technology startup company?
So you're all over the place.
We're all over the place.
Yeah.
Yes.
You've got remote employees as well. That kind of thing.
Exactly. We have. In fact, we have people. You know, we're a small company, but we've gone global. We provide engineering software for companies all over the world.
Gotcha.
And this has made it enormously difficult. By the way, we bootstrapped, and for the first 5 years, I went without a paycheck, and I had to pay that minimum income tax, put it on a credit card bill in order to stay legal for those first 5 years. It was, really painful to run on my credit card bill to pay the state minimum income tax for the company.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about the corporate excise tax.
The corporate minimum corporate income
whatever it is.
Yeah, that was really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked to a number of startup companies who said, this is the kind of thing that makes it really difficult for startup companies to get off the ground when you're trying to bootstrap and you've got to pay this minimum corporate income tax and you've got to put it on your personal credit card to do that. Mm-hmm. That's hard. But the insurance thing has been really crazy.
So, Ralph, on the insurance thing, what did you say it was, 176J?
Yes.
Hang on. I'll get we'll get your telephone number, and you should understand. I think not all the laws were passed while I've been governor, so I don't know.
I do understand.
I don't know the.
I
don't know the origins of all of them, but if there's a solution here that makes sense, I'm for it, and I hear what you're saying. In terms of the other issue, the minimum corporate excise tax, I think, is about $456.
I think it is.
And I think I'm right that there is a bill pending right now to eliminate the minimum corporate tax. I certainly hear many stories from startups about the bumpy years of startups and people having to fund this or that on a house loan or a credit card or money from friends in order to, and we want startups to survive. So I haven't actually gotten into the question about whether to eliminate the minimum corporate excise tax, but as I say, that's percolating, so I'm going to have to get up to speed on it soon.
But Ralph, don't hang up. You're going to leave your number with one of our producers in the governor's office. Will be in touch with you. Ralph, thank you for your call. 877-301-8970 is our number.
All right. The truth of the matter is, though, that insurance companies control a lot in the state. You can't buy a lot of insurance from another state, for instance. I mean, insurance companies control the situation here. They do.
Well, that sounds like a statement more than a question, but I think most states regulate insurance state by state rather than nationally. I don't know all the reasons or the history for that. I can imagine if you are an insurance firm in California, you'd have some questions about your ability to properly look after your customers on the other coast. But so much about commerce is international now that it's worth re-examining.
Which is why insurance should be.
It's worth re-examining, that sort of thing.
Governor, before we get back to the calls, we learned this morning that after days and days of this Peter Stefan, if I pronounce it directly, the guy who runs the funeral home in Worcester, trying to find a place for burial of the older Tsarnaev brother, and your position had been it's a family matter, not a government matter. We learned this morning that the body is apparently been buried out of state. What do you know about this?
All I know, and really all I know, I'm not being cute, is that and I just learned it not too long before coming over here, is that the body has been removed from the funeral home and has been buried at the direction of the family. I don't know where.
You don't know what state?
I don't know.
Our number's 8.
Let me just say, it was a circus.
It was.
And I understand that people's feelings about the cruelty of this crime run high. Mine do too, and hot. But the thing for us to focus on now is how to restore and repair the people who were hurt and the families who had loss, and how to assure that justice is done in the case of the ongoing investigation, and that's where my focus has been. I'm glad that the family exercised one of the options they had. I just don't know which one it was.
In retrospect, you're sorry you didn't take charge of this burial thing early on and just get this over with?
I have enough to do without.
Speaking of that, can I ask a question from Marjorie, since she's not here today, and I feel I'm sort of saddened by her absence. But it's an issue that
I like having Emily here.
Thanks.
If Marjorie's listening, which she is, it's going to make her very unhappy. Marjorie and I are on one side of this issue. Emily's on another. But let me broach it with you. Ken Feinberg was on the phone with us a couple of weeks ago, shortly after he was appointed. And Marjorie said, here's a question. There are hundreds of people killed every year, including quite a few in Boston. They don't get compensated. They just suck it up. How do you respond to that? And in part, Feinberg's response was it's hard to reconcile that. Bad things happen to good people. He talks about how wonderful the One Fund outpouring was. And he says it does raise questions, though, of fairness and equal protection. That's America. We've talked to people on the phone here in the last 2 weeks and no one who has called has said, resented a nickel of what's gone to the victims of April 15th, not even close.
Yeah.
But they say and this is where Emily and we disagree, there's a form of terrorism in communities where there are murders and you lose a son or brother or whatever. And we talked to Tina Cherry yesterday from Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, who's got the march on Sunday.
Yep.
She says she can't even raise enough money to bury some of the people who were killed if it turns out the person who was killed is a gangbanger or somebody, but their family loved them too. Where are you on that whole fairness, as Feinberg said, that fairness and equal protection kind of thing for other people who suffer horrible losses?
You know, on Saturday morning, after that fateful Friday, when Dzhokhar was apprehended, and we'd had hundreds of law enforcement in really walking distance from here. We'd had the shelter-in-place request through the day, and the house-to-house in Watertown, and state, federal, local law enforcement, the National Guard, beautifully coordinating. And when Dzhokhar was discovered in the boat, and hundreds of folks, law enforcement, heavily armed, rushed in that direction. As one of the state troopers described it to me, any one of them would willingly have put a gladly have put a bullet in him. But once he was apprehended and on the gurney and wheeled out past them, not one person, punched, spit, kicked, not one. That restraint by law enforcement was a thing to behold. And I think a thing to be proud of. But the word they used over and over again was about commitment. They were committed to solving this. And so that Saturday and Sunday, I was reflecting on that and thinking, what do you say now to the mom? And I met him, Kim Odom. I've met her.
Ron Odom just called us 2 weeks ago during the gun control vote in Congress. But go ahead.
What do you say to the victims of unspeakable violence against children and others in other communities who look at that kind of commitment across the way in Watertown a couple weeks ago and reflect on their own experiences? And I'm these are they're sort of existential questions, but they're not exactly existential questions. They are really questions about fairness, and I'm struggling with them too. I'm trying to think through what does this mean, and it's not to take away from the brilliance of the response by law enforcement and by the many generous contributors to the One Fund. It's been a beautiful thing, and a real source of pride and inspiration for me, and I think for a lot of others. But we can't forget there's a lot of unsolved badness in our community as well. And what do we learn from the Marathon bombings that helps us help others in our community who suffer from crimes that maybe don't get as much international media attention as the Marathon?
That's the voice of Governor Deval Patrick. This is Ask the Governor. He is here at 877-301-8970 at 1 o'clock. Brief break, and then all calls all the time.
If you and I, Kara, are both salespeople, and we're individually commissioned, why in God's name should I ever help you? I should probably try to poach your customers.
Dan Pink on a different approach to selling on Innovation Hub tonight at 9 here on WGBH Radio.
Explore is WGBH's interactive member guide, and it's your source for videos and interviews, behind-the-scenes extras, and highlights of your favorite WGBH programs. Start exploring at WGBH.org/explore.
This program is on WGBH thanks to you and the Massachusetts Teachers Association, reminding you that learning doesn't just happen in the classroom. It happens all day, every day. Working together, parents and teachers can make this a successful school year for every child in Massachusetts. And Gardner Mattress, specializing in handmade, lace-tufted, and custom-made mattresses. Handcrafted wood bed frames on display also. Celebrating 80 years. Located in Salem, Woburn, and Newton. GardnerMattress.com.
You're listening to Ask the Governor on Boston Public Radio. The number to get to the governor is 877-301-8970. I failed to tell you, this is the one time a month when there's streaming video on our website, WGBHnews.org. By the way, the governor's not embarrassed himself. I have, by motioning wildly, repeatedly to my friends in the control room. But if you want to watch the governor and the proceedings, you can do that. 877-301-8970. Emily Rooney sitting in for Marjorie Egan. I am Jim Browdy. Governor, take it away.
Who you got here, Gov?
Let's see. Gretchen is calling on the road.
Hi, Gretchen. Gretchen. Hi, Gretchen.
Hi, Gretchen.
First, Governor, I want to compliment you and say that I'm so proud to have you for our governor.
Thank you.
So many times in government, it's adversarial. It's very much the people and the government. And it doesn't feel that way with you. It feels like we are the government. And I really enjoy what you've done. And I really applaud your clarity and your conscience and your carefulness. And so thank you.
Gretchen,
and
thank
your
you.
compassion.
Thank you. Stop there, please. No buts. That was beautiful.
No buts. Two things. First, I want to say I've been working in domestic violence for a long while now, and I really see the effects of what you have done in the state. I see it making a priority has really, really, really helped. So let's keep that going if we can. That's a wonderful thing. My second issue is this. I know that you are in the midst of creating a new system around public housing. And I know that the plan that you've been thinking about has been to consolidate and to make, to sort of centralize control and also sort of maintenance, et cetera, of public housing. I live in public housing. I live in a very small neighborhood, very small. There are 30 of us in our unit. And it works well in that we have direct contact and can ask for what we need.
Yes.
I cannot imagine, and we wait, we have, we've got one guy who's our maintenance man. He's a love. He works yeoman's hours and yeoman's work, but still we wait, and it's tough to get a hold of the proper channels, etc. I'm thinking that if I had to call Wenham, say, or I had to call Reading, or I had to call, some other area far away, that there would not be that there would be big bureaucracy.
Right.
And I'm thinking that I know the difficulties that you've had, and I know that I'm so happy that you were able to uncover and deal with the whole Chelsea situation, etc. But I think that the way to, my opinion, and certainly you have a much more education and expertise around this, but my opinion in this situation is bigger is not better. The bigger you get, the more things get hidden. I think smaller and more oversight. Perhaps what we need is instead of consolidation, we need more oversight that has power.
Hey, Gretchen, can we have let the governor, if we can, just respond to your thoughts, please?
Thank you for all the points. Let me just say on the domestic violence point you made. I want to credit my wife, who has been a real leader in this area, has elevated the issues, has helped to draw public attention to the issues and to the many services that are available to people who are victims. She has encountered people, she's told me, in public restrooms where, without saying a word, she knows the person is a victim of domestic violence, and there's a card that she and others carry around, and she just slips the card. It has a phone number on it. She's gotten more people over the years who've said to her, you know, you saved my life, by speaking about your own experience or telling people how to find out where the services are. So I want to credit her for her extraordinary leadership in this area, and take your compliment as a compliment for her. On the public housing authorities, we have 240 public housing authorities, local public housing authorities in Massachusetts. That compares to, I think, 14 in Maryland, a state of similar size. You know, this is a little bit like, in my view, what we deal with 911 call centers. I know there are a couple hundred in Massachusetts. The state of California has 4. I think it is possible for us to strike a balance between the local touch that is so important, as you describe it, Gretchen, in your own unit, and more transparency and accountability. So what we proposed is many, many fewer. I don't know that the magic number is 4, but is 6. I think that's what we proposed. But it would not be about you're having to call some central office somewhere to get the plumbing unclogged. It would be about where the ownership and the financial reporting and so forth is consolidated for simplicity and for oversight reasons. And I think there's a balance there to strike, and a better one than we have right now.
You know, Governor, last time I think Marjorie and I spoke to you, you were kind enough to call us on a Saturday right after the marathon Monday, and you were on your way to Fenway Park. As part of a tribute to the first responders, well, as part of a tribute to you and Tom Menino, David Ortiz took to the microphone.
Yes, he did.
And Marjorie and I had a big debate about this. I thought it was perfect. What was your response to how David Ortiz expressed himself?
Well, you know, I'm old school, and my grandmother emphasized propriety, but you gotta love Big Pop.
Yeah, because it's the same thing, by the way, that he said to Dan Shaughnessy this week when Dan asked him if he was on steroids. He said, "Go."
He did?
Yourself.
Well, we'll choose to ignore that one.
He's so great, and he was so gracious in the locker room beforehand with the first responders, and as all of the team members were. So it was really great.
Let's go back to the phones. Governor DeVal Patrick with us till 1 o'clock. Governor.
Let's see. Kathy is calling from Pepperell. Kathy, you there?
Hello, Kathy.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Hi, Kathy.
Yes, you're on now.
Sorry to have you on hold for so long.
No, that's okay. I'm actually a broker, and I'm doing a broker open house right now. So.
Hope you make the sale.
Good luck.
Yeah. Anyways, Governor, you and I have spoken in the past several times about the Muni Choice Bill.
Mm-hmm. And the health care thing, right?
No, the Muni Choice Bill regarding utilities.
I'm sorry.
Competition.
Yes, the local. I know you. Hi.
I'm not from Pepperell. I'm in Pepperell. I'm from Lunenburg.
Yeah.
Yes, and we're still at it. We're still hopeful.
Yeah.
We've seen in recent weeks where Unitil customers have had higher than normal bills, which we've taken up with the Attorney General's office and questioned that. But, you know, bottom line is we really need this Muni bill to pass. It's been around so long in the State House, 12 years actually.
I was going to say, I remember it predates me a long time. We've talked about
Maybe
this a couple times.
Maybe you should explain what it is for people who don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Kathy, you want to say a word or two about what it is for people who may not? Yeah.
Sure. For those of us with investor-owned utilities, National Grid, Unitil, Western Mass Electric, what this bill would do is open the door to competition. It would allow towns, if they so choose, to form a muni. Municipal utilities in Massachusetts, there's 42 of them. They work very effectively insofar as their outages aren't like what we've seen with Unitil, with National Grid, long extended outages. They're run by the people, for the people. My office is actually situated in Groton, where they have a fabulous muni. I see them every day, and I'm so jealous. They trim all the trees. They're, very proactive in staying on top of their system.
Well, they have a local touch in much the way the previous caller was talking about local housing authorities.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's very bottom line. It's all people driven. It's, you know, community people involved and right on top of it. And you're not dealing with, you know, shareholders and, you know, where the money goes and that
Kathy,
sort of
can I
thing.
just add one little factor, too, to this for those who don't know? It's filed by Jay Kaufman from Lexington repeatedly. The evidence apparently shows lower rates, shorter outages when there are outages, and all that sort of thing. Do you support the bill, Governor?
I do. The concept is right. Actually, I'm not an expert on the bill. Kathy is. But the concept is right. And the idea of having competition around rates is very, very attractive. Now, electric rates have gone down in the Commonwealth about 40% in the last, 6 or 7 years, mostly having to do with generation costs. But we have traditionally high electricity rates because we're at the end of the pipeline. And not all of the reasons for that are apparent. And so having some competition for, you know, if I could say, look, I can choose based on rates between this company and that, which no one gets to do right now, or very few get to do, that's pretty attractive to me.
Also, my recollection is, Kathy, you may correct me, Marjorie Egan wrote a column about this. Has it been 90 years since there was the last creation of a municipal utility, give or take a few years? Oh, Kathy's gone. I think it's what's that?
Devon's actually, I think, was the last muni. If I'm, you know, Patrick Mayer would have that answer in a snap. But I think it was Devon's was the last one created.
Okay.
Kathy, were you just answering a question about the size of the closets for one of the people visiting your open house?
Well,
Kathy, thanks for the call.
You know, as long as we're talking about energy-related things here, Governor, there's a question on Facebook, and I've had the same question. Why can't we pump gas hands-free in Massachusetts? You know, other states have those little clips.
Yeah, I know.
I'm constantly looking for the clip. It doesn't exist here.
I know. Someone asked me that the other day. I can't remember whether it was on this show
some
or
safety thing, I'm sure.
You can see on some of them that it's been removed.
Risk. Yeah, all of them.
Yeah. I mean, but you can see the little notch that used to be. Yeah. I have no idea.
Can we ask for a quick casino update? Something you are involved, the casino situation. The Mashpee Wampanoags, if I'm pronouncing it right, you negotiated a deal with them, and then the state's gaming commission took away exclusivity at a recent meeting. Is that a factual, accurate statement?
Yeah, I think that's generally right.
And so where are you on that?
Have they taken away? I mean, what they've said is that they've opened the southeastern region to competition. I don't actually know whether there has been a bid from somebody else in the southeastern region. The tribe is, I think, understandably concerned because they are, frankly, further along than almost any other developer. They are now awaiting approval of the second compact, the first one having been rejected by the Federal Department of Interior. They're awaiting approval by the legislature here at home of the second compact. I think I'm right in remembering that the committee is going to hear that next week, so we're expecting that to move soon, and then they go back to Washington for approval of that compact, and we feel pretty good about it because we've been checking in and getting technical assistance from the Bureau of Indian Affairs all along. My hope is that the tribe will be positioned to move quickly because if they don't, we run the risk of there being more than 3 destination resorts in the whole of the Commonwealth, and that is outside the intent of the legislation. There's some technical reasons why that could happen, but there are a lot of reasons why it shouldn't.
Are you allowed to, or did you lobby the Gaming Commission not to take away the exclusivity?
No, I've done it. The Gaming Commission has authority completely independent of me, and I like it that way.
Good. Let's go back to the calls. Governor Deval Patrick with us till 1 o'clock at 877-301-8970.
So Natasha is calling from Taunton. Natasha, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi. So, Governor Patrick, I have a question for you.
Yes.
My husband is an electrical engineer at the Naval Undersea Warfare Center in Newport, Rhode Island.
Yep.
So we live in Taunton. Every day he commutes over that Saconnet River Bridge.
Yeah.
With the toll in
it's like $6,
that they are
right?
Proposing. Yeah, each way.
Yeah.
I was wondering if there was anything Massachusetts was doing or could be doing to maybe work out a deal with Rhode Island where if they work on Aquidneck Island or in that area, maybe Mass residents could get a discount from that.
Huh.
$5.75 each way.
That's interesting you say, because the trend in the in the discussion is going in the opposite direction in some respects, because there's a lot of interest in tolling as a source of revenue for transportation upkeep and repair. And tolling at the state lines is one of the ideas. There's you pay a toll to go into New Hampshire, for example, if you're going up north on 93, Natasha. And some folks in that area have said, why not put tolls on the Massachusetts side? We do it at the New York line on the Pike. There are folks in Metro West, which is the community around the 128 Mass Pike intersection, for whom toll equity is a big issue, and they have been advocating, and I think in the Senate transportation bill got language requiring the Department of Transportation to investigate adding tolls elsewhere on currently non-tolled roads. So there's because of the emphasis, and you hear this a lot from the business community, on user fees rather than more broad-based taxes to pay for transportation. I would say that the trend is more toward where to put tolls up rather than taking them down. But on the question of whether we've had any conversations with Rhode Island, I don't know, but I can find out if you want to leave contact information, and we can come back to you.
Natasha, stay on hold. One of our producers will get your phone number. The governor's also be in touch. Governor, staying on transportation for a second. This week on Emily's show, on the radio here, and on the web at WGBH.
You know, Emily used to invite me on her show.
She did?
I remember that.
What happened?
I don't know.
What was that? Well, she's here. What happened, Emily?
What are you doing tonight?
Something went wrong.
So in this
You
series,
got scared.
this 5-day series called Right of Way, it's about sort of the relationship between bicycles and drivers and pedestrians and exploring every single angle. Is there any money in your proposal or the House's version or the Senate version of the transportation thing that would expand access to bike lanes or that sort of stuff? What's in there?
So in the Way Forward, which was the plan that we came up with on transportation investment, the 10-year plan, there's actually quite a lot on dedicated bike lanes. Mm-hmm. It is hard to see how that gets funded certainly under the House version, and tough to see how it gets funded under the Senate version. What the final version is, we'll see. There's a lot of energy around this. And not just in Boston, by the way. A lot of energy around this and around the Commonwealth. And I think actually as you see more emphasis on so-called transit-oriented development, meaning housing that's clustered close to transportation nodes and so forth, there's a lot of interest in those communities about bicycles as an alternative.
You a bike rider?
I am.
You are?
Yeah, not a great one. Not
in Western Mass or out here
mostly,
or what?
Mostly
It was
in
last time
Western
he wrote. Chris Lydon is allegedly on his way over right now on a hubway.
He's here, I believe he.
Is he?
He's here. He did come on Hubway. We're told by Chelsea. When was last?
Isn't that a fabulous idea? The Hubway is terrific.
It would be nice if they had helmets, though, don't you? I mean,
they're going to do that. I heard last night that they said they were going to start doing that.
Marjorie's worried about lice, but that's an issue for her. I'm sorry. I'm speaking for her in her absentia. Governor, let's go back to the phones. Deval Patrick on Boston Public Radio.
John is calling from the Hunt. John, are you there?
John.
Hi, Governor. You there?
John.
Yes, he is.
How are you?
Turn your radio down.
John, you got to put the radio down, please.
I'm on speaker. Hold on.
Okay, well, we have nothing to do. We'll just wait. Okay, you ready for us?
I am. How you doing, Governor?
How you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good.
I graduated in 2000 from the University of North Carolina at Asheville and moved up to the New England area shortly thereafter.
Welcome.
But in my thesis for my bachelor's in sociology, I did my thesis on video surveillance technologies.
Mm.
And back in 2000, some of the research that I was looking at was from the New York ACLU.
Mm-hmm.
And they were reporting that face recognition technologies existed as early as the late 1990s. And that the cameras that were being built and implemented all throughout the United States in these major cities for traffic, related purposes had those capabilities, and it was pretty much as easy as taking a computer disk and sliding it into a computer somewhere and typing in the appropriate code, and you would have the
power to take over that camera and then track individuals throughout the city like criminals or whatever. So I
Sounds
just
like
wanted to
TV.
ask you if you had any information or knowledge about video surveillance technology systems like that, if Boston had anything like that, and maybe what could have been done, had been done with the Boston bombing had those systems been implemented.
So I don't know all the answers to those questions. I interrupted you when you were speaking to say it sounds a little like an episode from 24 you're describing. I know that there is facial recognition software. I don't think it's integrated in photographs, but that was used when to help evaluate all the videos and photographs that came in from commercial and private sources in the days after the bombings. Remember when during one of the press avails, the FBI asked for people to send their stuff, and they got a lot of it, and they had thousands of or hundreds of people going through that and using software that helped. And then when they identified who they believed the suspects to be, even then the quality of the images was not good enough for the facial recognition software to do a lot of good. Now then they got other images that then helped. But right at the point, you remember John, I don't know if you were following all this, but on that Thursday afternoon when the photographs were made available to the public, they were pretty grainy. They were
really grainy.
Right, and those were not good enough to be able to say who those people were. But the video indicated that those were people that we should be that the investigators should be focusing on.
Was that really the only?
Thank you, John.
Only photographs they had at that time? Because
those were the best. Those were actually
seemed like instantaneously they had clear pictures, within a couple of hours. And I was wondering if there was a reason why they released only the grainy ones.
No, there was things were moving pretty fast, and there was a video that I think has been described, but I won't go too far. But simply to say it made it pretty plain that these were the folks to pay attention to. It wasn't the one of them walking behind each other with the backpacks, but there's a pretty chilling video actually, and the images you could see these people, in one case taking the backpack off and putting it down and then moving to a different place picking it up and then moving it to a different place and putting it down and watching and the rest of it. But you couldn't get there wasn't a very clear image of the face. Once the images were made public, they got a lot more stuff and a lot better images. So it was the whole thing was breaking really, really fast.
Governor, I think you were campaigning for your Senate candidate yesterday, Ed Markey. Ed Markey, either on the radio or TV with me last week, I asked him a question. He's the chair of the Privacy Committee, which obviously means he cares a lot about personal privacy. I asked him where he was on the full disclosure of the UMass records at that point, just on the younger brother. It didn't involve the accomplices after the fact at UMass Dartmouth, and on the whole issue with welfare benefits to the Tsarnaev family. Where are you today on the public's right to know both those sets of information?
Well, the public has rights that are defined, knowing that information that are defined by federal law.
I should have said his view was the public should get everything. I didn't finish my sentence. I'm sorry.
I get that the public is curious, but I don't think we're going to violate the law just because people are curious. In the case of the education records, I think that information is really tight. I think that the University of Massachusetts asked the feds for a waiver or so. I don't know where that landed.
It was denied, actually. Yeah.
And in the case of the welfare benefits or public benefits, we have made everything public that can be made public, and we've given all the documents to the legislature because we believe that is in the law enforcement and administrative exception, basically. But they also have to keep it private. So as the committee's been going through it, they have been, I think, quite so far, quite responsible about the records themselves. Now, the substance of those records, who got what and was eligible for what, we put a lot of that information out to the public.
Let's take one more call, Governor, before the time is up. Governor Deval Patrick.
Let's see. Claire is calling from Boston. Claire, are you there?
Yes. Hello, Governor.
How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good.
I was very encouraged by your State of the State this year, where you talked about the importance of early childhood education and how you would make that a priority and fund it. But I'm wondering how you reconcile that with the fact that your administration right now is planning to close down the Shattuck Child Care Center, which is a very successful, high-quality, affordable child care center. It's been on the grounds of the Shattuck Hospital for the last 43 years, right at the intersection of Jamaica Plain, Dorchester, and Mattapan. It serves working families of the area, in particular the staff of the Shattuck Hospital. And your administration is planning on closing it down, which means getting rid of 39 child care slots in the city, and they have no intention of helping us relocate.
Well, I found out about Shattuck. I'm not an expert on that. As I sit here, I can tell you that the effort to get support, at least on the House side, for more early education funding has been stalled. If anything, the House has actually cut the early ed budget in their version. We'll see what the Senate does in their version and what the final version should be. I still believe that investing in early ed is in everybody's interests, the interests of the young people and the interests of the rest of us now and over time. That doesn't mean every early ed facility is just right or should be supported. That's not a comment on Shattuck. I just don't know about Shattuck, and I'll find out about it. If you want to hang on, I will. Sounds like you know a lot about it.
I do know a lot about it, and it's a fabulous daycare center. Again, it's been there for 43 years. Incredible community support, and we've been working with your DCAM and EOHHS, but they are not being receptive to us finding a new location and helping us do that.
Is that what the issue is, the location or the...
It is the location. We're in the personnel building of the Shattuck Hospital, which the state has plans to decommission, but it's a master planning process you have for the entire Shattuck campus, and from what we can understand, this master planning process is a 3 to 5 year process, and yet we've been told we need to get out by June.
You're saying this is a real estate issue, not the program.
Oh, no, it has nothing to do with the program. It has to do with the hospital campus itself. And we'd like to find a new space. We believe that the building is not good for us long term as well. We agree with your staff, but we would like to find new space on the grounds of the Shattuck Child Care Center and remain there.
Are you a parent?
No, sorry, I am a parent, and I'm also on the board of directors.
Okay. Well, let me look into it. If you want to hang on, I'll get some. That
would be great.
Contact information. We'll come back to you.
And
thank you very much.
As the governor says every time he's with us, every single email which we did not read, and it was all my fault, I forgot them. They will be full. My apologies, not the governor's fault. We'll forward them all to the governor's office, every one of which.
Got all squishy because Emily's here.
Yeah. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Governor, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
He'll be back next month. Is this the second Thursday? Yes, it is. He's here the second Thursday of every month. Governor Deval Patrick, thank you for your time.
All right, thanks, Governor. This morning we carried a live broadcast of the first congressional hearings on the Marathon bombings. Police Commissioner Ed Davis said that the Boston Police Department was never notified that Tamerlan Tsarnaev had been investigated by both the FBI and Russian intelligence. Should Boston police have been notified? We'll be having that conversation next on 89.7 WGBH, Boston Public Radio.
48th annual WGBH Spring Auction is on.
It's your chance to support the programs you love and get some great deals while you're at it.
You can bid on jewelry, electronics, unforgettable vacations.
Like a trip down the Blue Danube, adventures in Machu Picchu and the Azores.
Even a Beatles-themed cruise.
The Magical Mystery Tour.
Okay, please stop.
Sorry. And every winning bid supports the programs you count on.
See all the deals and place your bids online at auction.wgbh.org.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Ellis Insurance, offering personal and business insurance, financial planning, and their online insurance tune-up, identifying relevant risk management solutions for families and businesses. Exceptional service, intelligent insurance. EllisInsurance.com. And the Museum of Science, where starting May 19th, you can uncover a portal to ancient times at the new Dead Sea Scrolls exhibit. See what life was really like over 2,000 years ago. More at mos.org.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Emily Rooney sitting in for Marge. And we had other plans this afternoon. We were going to talk about new music. We'll probably do that tomorrow or the next day. We're going to talk about more about this terrific right-of-way cycling, driving series that GBH Radio, TV, and the web have been doing all week. But there's so much news in the bombing aftermath that Emily and I decided that it was best to stay there. The two things that have happened that are pretty dramatic is, one, there was testimony before Congress, the House Homeland Security Committee this morning. We're going to bring you some of that. Ed Davis, the commissioner, testified. Joe Lieberman, former United States Senator from Connecticut as well. We'll talk about that and the whole issue of could this have been prevented had the intelligence agencies and the police cooperated better. Deval Patrick answered the question in the negative a few minutes ago. But we also want to talk about this incredibly moving statement put out by the Richard family right before we went on the air. And Emily's going to read a little piece of it.
We've been anxious to hear from the Richard family, and not in a ghoulish kind of way. I think it's an anxious kind of way because we want to know how they're doing. We spoke to Brian McGrory about the Richards yesterday, and he said, well, they've been kind of around the perimeters of the family, but giving them their space because they weren't ready to talk. So earlier this morning, Bill Richard, the father of 8-year-old Martin Richard, released a statement. And it starts out by just saying our 7-year-old daughter Jane underwent her 11th surgery last night. She's got more trips to the OR ahead of her. She said doctors were finally able to close the wound created when the bomb took her left leg below the knee. Part of the procedure involves preparing Jane's leg to eventually be fitted for a prosthesis. He goes on to say that getting to this point has not been easy, that Jane had been comatose and unable to communicate for 2 weeks, and when she woke up, she had all these questions, and this line just is so hard to even read. Bill Richard says, there are not words to describe how hard sharing this heartbreaking news was on all of us. They had to tell their 7-year-old that her 8-year-old brother was dead, that her mother had lost eyesight, that the father, too, had been injured. Their older brother, Henry, is okay. He's 11. He's back at school. And, you know, this family is saying we're staying together. They were very complimentary of the medical staff at Beth Israel and the entire Longwood Medical Area Center. And just from the moment of the attack, they say they've been in the hands of well-trained people who have just been incredibly good at what they do. And it's a poignant statement that goes on for a little bit. And it's just, Jim has just had his head in his hands the entire 2 hours. I know, because getting your mind around it, we talked about this yesterday, but I said I was down at Spalding, and seeing some of the people that were injured just brings it into this reality. Of course we know, and we've seen them on TV, but when you actually see them, people missing their limbs and with shrapnel up and down their arms and their legs, and these kinds of wounds, and this family devastated. Others have been incredibly affected too. A family in Stoneham, 2 of one woman's sons each lost a leg. This family, though, it's hard to comprehend.
You know, also
the loss.
when you read parts of that to the governor a little while ago at the top of the last hour, and he said, you know, and I'm paraphrasing, the person that may be toughest for is Henry. They talk about that's the brother who has since returned to school. He lost his brother Martin. His sister is gone through 11 operations, has lost a leg. His mother has lost sight in one eye. His father was injured, but apparently getting better. And it is staggering. So what we're going to do is dedicate this hour to all things post-marathon, from the survivors, the victims, and where you are in this thing. One of my fears, numbers 877-301-8970, even though I totally agree with the governor, the outpouring of support and caring in this community and beyond for all these people is colossal. But if history is any example, I almost hate to say this, we have the attention span of gnats generally. I mean, look for example, we're the national cable stations from Copley Square to Cleveland. I assume they're on their way to Arizona in the wake of the conviction of Jodi Arias.
No, they were already there.
The death penalty, that sort of thing. And you worry, even though I think the concern is genuine for everybody, from the Richard family to every other family, the woman you interviewed the other day. The reality is, do we move on? Well, they have to deal with this both financially and emotionally and in every other way for the rest of their lives. So what obligation at 877-301-8970 do all of us have to the Richards and all these other people long-term, beyond the $30 million and all the notes that were left in Copley Square? That's point one. And point number two that I've been dying to talk to you about for days, and I know Emily's interested in this too, and I'm sure you are. Almost every day someone asks a question based upon new information. Could these bombings on April 15th have been prevented? We want to play a little sound. Boston Public Radio brought you this morning live these Homeland Security hearings when Ed Davis, the Boston Police Commissioner, was testifying. He was asked a question by the chair of the committee, who's from Texas, and he was asked whether the 4 members of the Joint Terrorism Task Force from the Boston Police, did they have any information, were they given any information from the FBI about their interview with Tamerlan Tsarnaev in 2011, and then they go on to ask him what he would have done had he had the information. Listen, the first voice you'll hear is Davis and then the chair of the committee.
They tell me they received no word on that individual prior to the bombing.
If you'd had this information before the bombing, would you have done, your police force and you, would you have done anything differently?
That's very hard to say. We would certainly look at the information. We would certainly talk to the individual. From the information I've received, the FBI did that, and they closed the case out. I can't say that I would have come to a different conclusion based upon the information that was known at that particular time.
But if you knew of a Russian intelligence warning that this man was an extremist that may travel overseas, and the fact that he did travel overseas and came back into the United States, would that may not have caused you to give this individual a second look?
Absolutely.
Would you have given this individual a second look?
Yeah,
absolutely.
He says absolutely.
And you know what? By the way, let me be clear here, because I don't want to be one of these exploitative souls on radio and television. I'm not saying it would have been prevented, but I think that for those who don't want to have the discussion about whether or not the so-called stovepiping, the protection, the turf around information amongst the federal intelligence agencies, the fact that the FBI didn't tell the people in the Joint Terrorism Task Force about this.
What about, did they tell the CIA? Did they tell Homeland Security? You know, all of these agencies were right down there on a marathon diet. You know, you've heard me say in the past, it always feels like overkill. It seems ridiculous. This enormous Homeland Security satellite truck sitting on Commonwealth Avenue, right around the corner from where this happened. And you'd think they'd have a list that they would be interconnected through some kind of a sophisticated computer system, that they'd have these names of people that would be popping up, that they would have facial recognition technology, as one of our callers said, and that these people who are in our neighborhoods, living in Watertown or Cambridge or whatever they are, that had popped up on some kind of an FBI watch it list, would be popping up. What else are they doing there? I'm not asking that for real. What is Homeland Security doing on the Commonwealth Avenue Mall, if not trying to recognize people who could be a danger to the marathon?
Our number is 877-301-8970. We're talking about whether the information this morning causes you to believe there's still serious questions about whether or not April 15th could have been prevented. And if you have a reaction, because both of us had very strong ones, and we assume you did too, to the statement from the Richard family and the stories that you see, or either on Emily's show or in the Globe and the Herald every single day about some of the survivors, please give us a buzz. You know, the question that I would like to ask an FBI person, after you hear from Ed Davis this morning, if you have a Joint Terrorism Task Force in place, what possible reason would there be for you not to share the fact? By the way, this may be nothing. We concluded it was nothing.
Closed it out.
There's this kid that lives, a 24-year-old at the time, lives on Norfolk Street in Cambridge. It's probably nothing, but you should put him in your database because the Russians said he was becoming a radical Islamist, and you should at least know about it, even if they downplayed it. So it's in the computer. Maybe there's a picture. As you say, what is the point of a Joint Terrorism Task Force if the information is not shared? I just don't get it.
Yeah, the only thing that was a little bit kind of disingenuous, I thought, this morning. This guy, McCall, is that his name?
That's the chair of the committee from Texas,
I mean,
yeah.
He was kind of politicizing this, too, because he was forcing Ed Davis to essentially say he'd never heard of these guys, and of course he would have wanted to know, but the suggestion was that somehow the administration failed here, that there was not a connection of the dots, and as the governor said just a few minutes ago, I mean, could it really have done anything? Would it really have prevented it? He says he didn't think it could
but
have.
It might have, and at least, Joe Lieberman, who is not a Republican, he was a Democratic senator from Connecticut. He became an independent after he lost the Democratic primary, and he won the Senate race, and he caucused with the Democrats. Here's Joe Lieberman, because I think he was either the chair of the Homeland Security Committee or a leader in it. Listen to what Joe Lieberman had to say at this morning's hearing as well. Again, we played this live on Boston Public Radio. Here it is.
Nobody bats 1,000%. It's true. But why didn't they involve the local law enforcers who could have stayed on this case and picked up signals? So how do you explain it? People are imperfect.
People are imperfect.
Yeah, but
it's a hell of an answer.
Yeah, but you wonder how many other people just like this. Is it so overwhelming? Are the lists so long? Is it so daunting that they can't, and once you've investigated somebody, that's sort of a relief. You take them off your list. Are there other people like that they haven't scratched off the list, that the case is still kind of open and they're not
but
sure?
Emily, we had this discussion with, you weren't here this day, with Dana Priest, who's an expert on the air from the Washington Post. She's won Pulitzer Prize. She did that great documentary last week on public PBS. And we were joking, but not that Visa doesn't throw out your records when they get old. They keep, they have information forever. Order your credit report. I'm not suggesting, let me be clear here so people don't think I'm as naive as maybe I sound. I'm not suggesting that some FBI leader sits down and says, Ed Davis, or your 4 representatives on the Joint Terrorism Task Force, let's spend an hour talking about somebody that we didn't think was a real problem. There are computers. Transmit the data on who is in Ed Davis's jurisdiction. I know Cambridge is not Boston. It's in the computer. If they do nothing with it, they do nothing with it. But at least it's there for some sort of a search at appropriate times.
And how many cities and towns does the marathon go through? So those are the exact, of course, it goes all the way up to Hopkinton. So 26 miles worth of cities and towns. So every single person who was identified in any one of those cities and towns should have been, all the police chiefs should have been notified, but certainly Boston, where the finish line.
Right. So would it have prevented the bombing? Who knows? Could it have prevented the bombing? It possibly could. Let's get some phone calls on this. James, you're in Sandwich. You're with Jim Browdy and Emily Rooney sitting in for Marjorie Egan. Welcome, James. Thanks for the call.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking my call. There's a couple of things. At the time of the bombing, if I recall correctly, it was a heavy presence there of officers, and I believe they were conducting tests or sweeps.
Yeah.
And they were pronouncing that they were, we're just, conducting tests. We're looking for bombs. It's no big deal.
No, they did do that, and they explained that the last sweep they did was at 10 o'clock in the morning, and they used bomb-sniffing dogs. The race goes off at 10, so they figure they got to get the sweep in before people start, the wheelchair runners, for one, start coming across the finish line. So they do that sweep at 10 o'clock, but then are the dogs walking up and down the road? No.
And then the other thing that occurs to me now, after hearing your comments, is exactly how many times do people like the Russians contact us and say, hey, watch out for this guy?
That's a good point.
Are we contacted frequently by foreign governments, or is this a very rare and unusual occurrence?
That's a good question. I have no idea. Do you, Jim?
I do not know the answer to the question, but I do know there was... yeah, go ahead. The FBI gets a call from Russia. Is it an everyday occurrence? Oh, yeah, look at guy A, B, and C, or is it an odd thing to have them call up and say, hey, you ought to look at this guy? Odd or not, the one thing we do know, and neither Emily nor I know the answer to that question, one of the things we do know the answer to is based upon that information, one intelligence agency put the Tsarnaev brother on a watch list. The other one didn't put him on a watch list. He goes to Russia. He's on a watch list because the timing expires during the time that he's away. He's off the watch list when he comes back. So the bottom line is the system to 9/11. Thanks for the call, by the way, James. 9/11 was supposedly the wake-up call. We all heard about the agencies not talking to each other. Allegedly, that was fixed. We apparently have made progress, according to all the experts. But to me, the most basic stuff in the computer age was not done here.
And also, remember that report, which there's never been an ounce of proof of, that they misspelled his name when he entered Russia, and that's why it wasn't a catch when he came back or something like that. It's like, where's the proof of that? I never saw his name printed somewhere that was misspelled. Is that one of those things that
letter was allegedly off.
But
well,
did we see that?
No, we did not. But we had a great caller on that, and I wish I remember his or her name at the time, who said if you mistype a name into Google, it corrects the name for you. So you would assume within the FBI database or whatever the watch list database is, if you type Tsarnaev in with one letter wrong, it's going to correct to the proper spelling.
The A or something? I don't know.
But, it's one of these things where, one of the things I liked about this morning's testimony, I hope you were listening to it here on Boston Public Radio when Davis was there, he was answering questions that he hasn't answered. And I'm not being critical of him for this for the first time. There's so many questions, and it gets back to what I think you, Margie, and I had this discussion a couple of Fridays ago. You want to see Delorier from the FBI, Ed Davis from the Boston Police, and maybe one or two other law enforcement people sit down in a room and say, we can't do this every day. We're going to sit here until every question is answered. Some we can answer for reasons that are obvious, but every question we can, we will.
Even that question I just asked the governor about the photographs. I am not convinced that there weren't other photographs that the FBI could have released that night, because if they identified them from those two, then there were others, as the governor explained. He said there's a video we haven't seen. That's what he was telling us, that you could see them walking down the street placing the bombs. Why not release that video?
Well, I think he was saying the one video that he was referring to. Doesn't mean there weren't others. The one I thought he was dancing around the notion that it was so gruesome that it sounded like there was some. But I guess they could have taken those out of it. I don't know. I don't know what the answer to the question is.
I don't know. It's something they haven't released when you're seeing them plant the bombs. But if they had already identified, my simple point is, if they had already identified those two grainy photographs, they clearly had many, many others that were clearer. Why did they only release the grainy one?
Well, and match that to the question we all asked starting that Friday after the marathon. If they had these photographs as early as, one must assume, at least the day before that Thursday, and there was a photograph of Tsarnaev based upon his 2011 interview, why was there not, couldn't have been a match there? So, exactly. And by the way, against this backdrop, if you just tuned in a couple of minutes ago, at about 11 o'clock or 11:15 today, there was a statement, the first comprehensive statement released from the Richard family. And at the bottom of the hour, we'll read you a little more from this if you just tuned in. It is so heartbreakingly sad. It is staggering.
By the way, one of our producers is writing saying that there's a clip from the Frontline documentary that has Richard Clark talking about how the underwear bomber got off the hook because of some spelling error.
Do we have this? Let's hear this. This is Richard Clark, you'll remember from days gone by. Listen to this.
Because the Nigerian guy's name was misspelled by one letter, he did not pop up. The little bits of data about him were not correlated. Those dots were not connected.
Google does it. If you mistype something on Google, it says, "Did you mean this?" And despite spending all the billions of dollars on databases, that simple spell check, "Did you mean this?" kind of software wasn't operating.
Wow.
It's all, what do you say?
Yeah.
What do you say?
Yes. We have all these red alerts and blue alerts and purple alerts, and all this is just such basic stuff. This is how you're going to catch somebody.
One of the reasons you don't. I was
pushing a button.
I only saw a piece of the Frontline documentary that was spectacular, but when Dana Priest was on with us talking about this thing, I hope I get the number right. It was either 1,200 or 1,400. Intelligence agencies with the highest level clearance, just as the highest level clearance, she said they're either 1,200 or 1,400. Now, I don't know enough to answer the obvious question is, why is there such a mass of intelligence infrastructure that's got to be overseen? There's got to be colossal duplication, and obviously not information sharing because of this stupid turf stuff that exists with people.
We keep saying some sophisticated computer system could be, secure system where you could be cross-tabulating this stuff and only a handful of people, have access to this stuff that pulls up. But then when some green light goes off, then you clue in people like Ed Davis.
I'm with you, 877-301-8970. We're talking about, based on Davis's testimony this morning and Joe Lieberman's, to an extent, Ed Davis's testimony that you heard here live on Boston Public Radio. Where are you in this whole issue of whether or not these bombings and the horrible aftermath could have been avoided? And if you have a reaction to the powerful statement from the Richard family earlier this morning, again, we'll read more in a few minutes. Please share it with us at 877-301-8970. Let's go to Martha. You're in New Bedford with Emily Rooney and Jim Browley. Hi, Martha.
I guess I really feel
this is kind of a blame game. People want to say, hey, if this had happened, that lovely little boy would be alive today.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we could have prevented it. When you got, and facial recognition, let's get real. What were there, 500,000 people, maybe 750,000 people along the route? Come on. I mean, it really...
Let's just stay for a second. Let's forget talking. You'll continue in a second, Martha. Forget pre-marathon. Once they had the picture of the older brother, which was quite clear, once they had that picture, if they had matched that to something that I assume has got to be an FBI file, since they questioned him, his family, and friends in the summer of 2011, they couldn't have prevented the bombing. No. But Sean Collier might be alive today, the MIT police officer, rather than saying to the public, by the way, does anybody recognize these people? The assumption is the picture of the same guy was in their files in Washington, D.C. Is that not a fair conclusion to reach?
Yeah, I guess it is. I could see that. I do question your Googling thing, because when you're talking Cyrillic alphabet, or, there's a lot of different ways to spell people's names, and I'm not sure that would work.
Well, that was Richard Clark. Forget what I had to say. I don't know what I'm talking about. Richard Clark.
Yeah, the federal government should have a system in place that pops up a name if somebody misspells it, right?
Yeah, that's what I understand. But I started thinking about different ways.
Well, forget Google, though.
The name was spelled.
Martha, the bottom line is it's possible you were right. I'm not suggesting I'm privy to some great amount of information about how all this cross-checking is done. But I think what Emily and I are both saying is there are a ton of questions to be asked and answered, including, we're talking about the misspelling. I think Emily makes a great point. Do we know that actually happened, or was that just a cover for their losing this guy when he took off to Russia for 6 years? And if it did happen, is there a federal system like Emily's describing that has the ability, far more sophisticated than Google, to make the correction? The bottom line is, Martha, we still don't know. Martha, thank you for your call. 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio. Brief break, more of your calls, and then we're going to read you some of the incredible statement from the Richard family issued earlier this morning.
Next time on The World, the flower of empire, how an Amazonian water lily of vast proportions became the iconic flower of Victorian Britain.
The leaves are 5 feet across at least, sometimes 6, sometimes even 7.
And that's what you mean by vast. It is a big lily.
Big lily.
The story behind the iconic flower of Victorian Britain. That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on 89.7 WGBH.
WGBH programs exist because of you. And Massachusetts College of Art and Design Continuing Education, registering for summer classes, drawing, photography, graphic design, fashion, and more. Programs for youth and adults. massart.edu. And Butler Hospital conducting a research study for depression requiring daily visits for 6 weeks involving a new form of brain stimulation. Information at 401-455-6537 or newdepressionstudy.com.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. Emily Rooney is sitting in for Marjorie Egan. You don't look like Marjorie Egan. Emily Rooney is here, and thank you, Emily, for sitting in. Marjorie will be back on Monday. Earlier this morning, we carried live testimony from the House Homeland Security hearings on the bombing and what led up to the bombing and the bombing aftermath, focusing on the testimony of Ed Davis. As we were watching this and trying to figure out what to make of it, a statement was released by the Richard family. And if you haven't heard any of this, Emily's going to share a piece of it with you.
It really is tough. And we were saying earlier, Jim, that we've been anxious to hear from the Richard family because they've suffered so much. They lost their 8-year-old son. We know that the daughter was injured. The mother was injured. We didn't know the severity of those injuries. So Bill Richard this morning released a statement on behalf of the entire family and the hospital. And it reads in part, he says, our 7-year-old daughter Jane underwent her 11th surgery last night. She has many more trips to the OR ahead of her, but she says last night's was an important milestone because they were finally able to close the wound that was created when the bomb took her left leg below the knee. They said they're now preparing Jane's injured leg to be fitted for a prosthesis, but then He goes on to say that getting to this point has not been easy for Jane, that in addition to all of the surgeries, she's also had to fight off infections and other complications. And then, after not being able to communicate with Jane for the first 2 weeks, she woke up with difficult questions that needed to be answered. And Bill says there are not words to describe how hard sharing this heartbreaking news was on all of us. He goes on to say that he and Denise are home now. Denise does not have sight in one of her eyes. Bill had shrapnel wounds and burns to his legs that are now healing, but they both have suffered hearing loss. His has not come back, and they'll keep us posted on that. And then he goes on to say that Henry, their 11-year-old son, has gone back to school, which he says gives him a needed sense of routine and normalcy. And he goes on to, of course, compliment all of the first responders, the hospital, the care they've gotten, and the outpouring of support they've gotten from the community. And Jim, it's just, it's just so hard to see this. But I mean, we've wanted to know how they're doing. We just can't imagine what it's been like for Bill Richard, going in and out of the hospital rooms, burying his son in the middle of all this, and worrying about the care of his wife and daughter at the same time.
You know, in hearkening back to the discussion you and I had yesterday and you had with the governor today, I'd like to think that virtually everybody within the sound of our voice and beyond has shown great empathy in any way they could for the people who suffered some of these grievous injuries. But it's so clear, when you were describing so graphically and powerfully yesterday your visit with that woman, it's all in the abstract. It doesn't mean we don't care, but when you read the papers, when you see the interviews on television, it's one thing. It really does touch you. But I can't imagine what it's like. Like Deval Patrick said, he visited a ton of the families a day or two after the bombing. You visited the one where she lost one leg? Is that what
she did, but I felt like I could have been her. You know, just, and I mean that sincerely, because I was right down at the finish line. I was 2 blocks away. I wasn't at the finish line, but I just tried to put myself in her position. It's a beautiful day. You're leaving, you leave the ballpark, you're at the Red Sox game, what could be better? You're planning to meet a bunch of friends at the Forum restaurant. You know, she wanted to watch her friend. She had her iPhone app, you know, clicked into the numbers of her running friends. She knew it was about time for them to cross the finish line. She pushes in, she turns to a guy next to her and says, hey, she says, I'm short. You know, I'd like to, you know, she's very small. She's smaller than me. She says, I'd like to get in a little closer so I could see. And he said, well, I'd like to let you in, but actually my wife is about to come across the line, so I kind of need to, you know, can we share the space? Well, she doesn't know what happened to him. She says she was standing maybe, I'm going to say 2.5 feet, because she pointed to a purse I had sitting on the ground, and she said about 2.5 feet from where the bomb went off, and it was right next to a mailbox. And she said her friends were on the back side or the other side of the mailbox, and she thought in some respects that maybe the mailbox had protected her friends from being injured the way she was.
How's her psyche? I mean,
you know, she said to me, I kept letting the camera roll, so I was kind of done with the interview, and I said, well, thank you, Roseanne. And then we paused, and she kept talking, and then she looked at me and she said, you know, talking about this is therapeutic for me because it makes it more real, because I keep thinking this is a temporary situation, like I'm going to wake up and it's not going to be there, or in 3 months, it'll all go away. If I do everything I'm supposed to do, my therapy and this and that the problem will go away. But she says the reality is I'm going to have this situation for the rest of my life. And I'm trying to wrap my head around it, and by talking about it, because it's a big distraction for her there. Her friends are there. Her family is there. Everybody's trying to cheer her on, bringing her decent food to eat. And she's got these very intensive physical therapy sessions. She does 3 and 4 hours a day. But you know, when she's all alone in her head, these are the kinds of things she thinks about.
Well, I also think it matters that people like you care enough to go talk to her. And obviously she chose to do it. You didn't force your way in. And the question I was trying to get to a while ago is, what happens in a few months when you don't go anymore? I don't mean you. I mean the generic you. I mean, obviously there'll be some follow-up. But, you know, does that say to them, well, all of those people cared about me in the immediate aftermath, but now they've moved on to the next whatever it is?
Well, the same day I was there, CNN was there shooting a documentary that's going to be a year-long process with John Tolmacki from the Boston Globe. He's that fantastic photographer who took, now I hate to turn to, but that iconic photo that was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And they're following
the 3 cops you're talking about.
Yeah, the 3 cops, and kind
with
of
the fallen older runner. Yeah.
So they're going to be following up on all the people that John took pictures of that day, and he did not take that one of Jeff Bowman, where the
with Carlos
awful
Arredondo
picture with, where literally the flesh is blown away from his legs from the knees down. That one he did not take, but he took a number of them, including ones with the Corcorans, the young Corcoran, the daughter, lying on the ground. She had a huge shrapnel wound in her leg that was running her femoral artery, and then the mother was lying there without either of her legs. And seeing her there, you're used to seeing when you go into a rehabilitation hospital. I was there recently when Mayor Menino was there. You're used to seeing people with grievous injuries, and you have no idea what happened to them. You're wondering, wow, I wonder what happened there. You go into the Spalding rehab and you see this woman, and you say, oh my God, that's what happened to her. It's just awful.
Number's 877-301-8970. Glenn, you're in Brookline. You're on with Emily Rooney and Jim Brody. Thank you for waiting, and thank you for your call.
Thanks. I'm a taxonomist by trade.
What does that mean in English? Sorry.
You laugh.
What is that?
Basically, I work in words.
Okay. Okay.
So what you were saying about how someone was missed on a list by one misspelling of a letter.
That's what they say. That's what the contention is. Yeah.
Sure. So if you open that search up and you make it looser, then more folks will be captured by that search.
Sure.
And then you'll have more, basically more false positives. What we call in library science, you'll have greater recall but less precision.
Well, that makes sense. But what's the bottom line? Where do you end up with that analysis, Glenn?
Well, whenever you have greater recall, you have more people being stopped and searched. And I don't know if, as a society, we would be able to handle having more folks being stopped and searched by loosening the search parameters, basically.
No, but Glenn, what we're saying is, if you have a sophisticated computer technology that is not Google, and you've had a guy who was already in your system, and his name was Tsarnaev, if you typed that name into a travel document, a visa or something, that there'd be some kind of an interconnection with whatever the government agency was who've already looked into this guy. You're not doing a general sweep at that time. You're doing a very specific sweep, and it might say,
you're not. You're doing you're going to capture everybody who is Tsarnaev or Tsarnaev, and basically the entire. If you're looking at if you conceptualize the language or the last naming structures of a culture, like
no, but you're only looking at a name that has already been identified as a problem person. So you're not just picking up any Tsarnaev or Tsarnaev, unless those people are also on that list.
And if they're on the list and you end up as you say, false positives, end up stopping even 10 people you shouldn't have, you apologize afterwards and say, I didn't mean you. So I hear you, but I'm with Emily. What are you called again? What is it you do?
Are you?
Tell me the name.
Taxonomist.
Taxonomist, okay.
Are you willing to be stopped for, say, Emily Tooney?
But my name is not on the list. This is the point I'm making.
Well, but Emily Tooney's is. But you're Emily Rooney. Mm-hmm. So you would be stopped.
Well, but put it this way, Glenn, I don't want to be stopped if I didn't do anything wrong or I'm not intended to be on a list. But the assumption is that when they stopped Emily Tooney and answered your question and sees that in 30 seconds that she is not the person that they're interested in, they say, sorry, we bothered you, and she goes on her way. Glenn, all I'm saying, you know more about this than we do. All I'm saying as a layperson, and I think Emily's in the same boat that I am, it's hard to believe when you have $1 trillion, multi-$100 billion intelligence infrastructure that a letter being wrong is the difference between following somebody and not. But Glenn, thanks for your expertise, and we appreciate your call. 877-301-8970. I hadn't even thought about what you said before, is how do we even know that was not a CYA kind of argument? Yeah. Meaning when they said, well, we missed them one way because of the misspelling. It's sort of like you continue to ask the question about
whatever happened to that
the Moakley Courthouse.
I don't believe that for one
Has
second.
There been one
not
explanation
one follow-up
anywhere?
Story on that there was a bomb scare called in on that Thursday or was it the day before? I can't remember. It was the day.
No, it was the day because they went ahead with the Thursday. They canceled the press conference
and they
in part because of the Moakley Courthouse
the claim
bomb scare.
That was when all that false reporting was going on, that they had two suspects that they were bringing into them.
Right.
And suddenly the courthouse gets cleared out because there's a bomb scare. Really? Who called it in? And what did the bomber say? Was it a 911 call? Where did it come in? There should have been recording if it came into the courthouse. Or was that a ruse to get rid of everybody?
Well, in part, people like me thought that the reason there's a bomb scare is because suspects are about to be brought. But then when we found there were no suspects to be brought, the rationale for a bomb scare sort of disappeared with it. 877-301-8970. This morning, before we went on the air, a powerful, poignant statement was released by the Richard family talking about the condition, particularly of their daughter. You say the 7-year-old daughter, who's had 11 operations so far. They also talk about the blindness in one eye of the wife, the recovery of the husband, and the fact that Henry is back at school, the brother, in a fairly, I guess, normal environment, if there is such a thing. And that came just minutes after a hearing of the House Homeland Security Committee. And you heard Ed Davis's testimony live here in Boston Public Radio. And if you just tuned in, can we play that piece one more time? He's asked the question. This is what is sticking with me, at least. Ed Davis has asked the question about whether or not he knew anything or was alerted by the FBI or federal authorities at all through his 3 detectives and 1 other police member on the Joint Terrorism Task Force Committee. Here's his response, and then some back and forth between the chair of the committee and Commissioner Davis.
They tell me they received no word on that individual prior to the bombing.
If you'd had this information before the bombing, would you have done, your police force and would you have done anything differently?
That's very hard to say. We would certainly look at the information. We would certainly talk to the individual. From the information I've received, the FBI did that, and they closed the case out. I can't say that I would have come to a different conclusion based upon the information that was known at that particular time.
But if you knew of a Russian intelligence warning that this man was an extremist that may travel overseas, and the fact that he did travel overseas and came back into the United States, would that may not have caused you to give this individual a second look?
Absolutely.
We asked the governor about this in the first hour, and the governor's, I don't want to speak for him, but Emily, you'll correct me if I'm overstating it. He said that does not get him to the place where he believes the bombing could have been prevented. I'm not there either.
No, and I don't think Commissioner Ed Davis is saying that either, but he is saying that had he been given that information, absolutely, that's someone they would have wanted to know about.
And if they'd wanted to know about, and he was on their radar screen, and then you heard, even though not a crime, that person on your radar screen got involved in 2 angry exchanges in the mosque on Prospect Street in Cambridge, because his contention, Tamerlan's alleged contention, was that people who were speaking were not respectful enough of Muhammad or of Muhammad's birthday. Again, to me, that isn't, you can get thrown out of the mosque for that. You haven't violated any law, but does that heighten your awareness and say, this guy's got a few loose ends that we have to pay attention to? Could it have led to enough scrutiny to cause the thing on the bombing not to have happened? I don't know. All I do know is it didn't happen because the people on the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which I assume exists for information sharing reasons, were never told about the interview that was done, the interviews that were done in the summer of 2011.
I also just cannot believe that no one else around him didn't know about his extremism. I mean, his wife, number one, of course, Catherine Russell, she had to have known, but others who heard him day in and day out. You know, he gave up all the worldly things that he used to love, from boxing to certain types of food and alcohol
his clothes,
and clothing,
he was a
everything.
Fancy dresser, yeah.
I mean, he was morphing into something that he wasn't before. You can't tell me that people didn't notice.
And again, that isn't a crime, and it's not actionable to use the word the governor used, but it does, I would assume, raise the radar on the part of police if they're checking this guy out.
Even the people you just referred to who were at the mosque, I haven't heard anyone say, I was there, I heard him say this, it was disturbing, or he got thrown out because... I haven't heard anybody, have you?
Well, I've heard that. I haven't heard, and then I did something with it. It's all after the fact where they've described what he did in the mosque on those couple of days. In any case, that's the voice of Emily Grooney. She's sitting in for Marjorie Egan. I am Jim Browder. You're listening to Boston Public Radio. We'll be back in a couple of seconds.
Tina Gordon Chisholm made her name in Hollywood writing films like Drumline and ATL. Now she's making her directing debut with the new comedy Peoples. It has the backing of hit filmmaker Tyler Perry and features major stars like Diane Carroll and Kerry Washington. So how'd she do? Tina Gordon Chisholm takes us behind the scenes of her new film Peoples next time on Tell Me More.
This afternoon at 2 here on 89.7 WGBH.
This program is made possible thanks to you and New Repertory Theater presenting Amadeus, the Tony Award-winning drama of Antonio Salieri, thwarting Mozart's legacy, through May 19th. More info at 617-923-8487 or newrep.org. And Xfinity Home from Comcast, the new home security and home control solution from Comcast, combining 24/7 professional monitoring and online management tools. Xfinity Home. More at xfinity.com/home.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Emily Rooney sitting in for Margery Egan. We scrapped our plans for today. The governor was here for the first hour, and we decided in light of the statement from the Richard family and in light of the quite interesting testimony from Commissioner Davis and Joe Lieberman, former Senator Joe Lieberman from Connecticut, in front of the House Homeland Security Committee, we should devote the last hour to all things post-marathon. Let's go back to the calls. Let's go to Joseph. You're in Watertown with Emily Rooney and Jim Braude. Hey, Joseph.
Hi, Jim and Emily.
Hi.
Yeah, you're raising some very good points, and I want to add that, he was interviewed by the FBI in, June 2011?
Right. 2011, yep.
And then on September 11th, 2011, the triple murders in Waltham occurred. His best friend, Brendan Mess, Eric Weissman, and Raphael Tenkin were murdered with their throats slashed, and at the time, when the investigators were looking into it, and it's unsolved now, Tamerlane's now the lead suspect, the friends of Brendan said that they suspected Tamerlane of the murder because of his behavior. And
not only his behavior, the family couldn't understand why, if Derek Mess's best friend was Tamerlan Tsarnaev, and by the way, Tsarnaev himself introduced people to Derek Mess as his best friend.
Brendan.
Derek's the father. My apologies. The Brendan Mess. Why wasn't he at the funeral? Which raised even more questions for people. Yeah. So where are you going with that?
Okay. Well, the thing is, they interviewed him, and I suspect that he probably figured the one person he socialized with, and like you were saying, people probably heard him saying these radical things, and he probably suspected that he turned him into the FBI, and it was a revenge killing.
Oh,
I haven't heard that thesis before, but
I just think that's the
plausible. That he turned him in a few months earlier, so when he was questioned in June, and then a couple months later, this is some kind of a payback. That's an interesting
Or at least
theory.
Tamerlan Tsarnaev thought that Brendan Mess was behind his...
Yeah, because I'm sure the FBI probably didn't tell him, well, the Russians called us up, and they said, they don't give away their sources.
Yeah, the only thing is there was a lot of dope involved. I mean, there was a lot of...
marijuana was sprinkled over the bodies. Yeah, we don't know what the import of that was, though.
No, that was, I think, if anything, that was showing that he wasn't there to steal the marijuana or money, which was left there as well. It was that he was sending a message, and it was on September 11th.
You know what's Joseph, thanks for the call. You know what's interesting? I was saying to you a little bit ago, Emily, in a totally different context, that I worry that with our short attention spans, and I don't just mean the media, I mean humans who are not in the media, that the victims for whom we profess, I think, legitimately such concern now are going to be backburnered for us. A triple murder, one of the most gruesome triple murders in recent times, 2 years ago. And had you thought about it for a second after?
I never would have thought of it again.
Never, nor would I. And by the way, one of the families actually lives down the street from me, so I have a reason to think of it again. I never thought of it again until all of a sudden the older brother was, and potentially the younger brother, because they said they probably needed two people to overpower all three of them.
It was never one of the really high-profile murders. I mean, it certainly didn't raise the level of the Dorchester triple shooting, quadruple shooting. It didn't raise to that level. And I'm not sure why, but it made the news, but I couldn't have named one of the victims, or I couldn't have pictured one, so it never really got that much attention.
877-301-8970. Let's go to Paul. You're in Somerville. You're on with Emily Rooney and Jim Braude. Hey, Paul.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Hi.
I'm calling from the All-American Sanctuary City of Somerville. I have a lot of frustration and anger
Yeah.
Because if you look at the media, and I see some of the black community saying that this ongoing violence has been taking place, and Boston's on a very small scale compared to Chicago and Detroit, has been going on in America for God knows how long. And they're trying to say it's terrorism.
Well, by the way, let me just interrupt you.
Jim
It's a
says it's
small
terrorism.
scale unless you're of the family of one of the people who was murdered. That's number one. And number two, it's not just people in the black community. Marjorie and I both believe that it's terrorism of a different sort. I'm not saying we're right, but we share that
And terrorism
perspective.
is, just to say, Paul, I would not use the word terrorism.
But go ahead, Paul.
Well, I would agree, Jim, right away. That's a good point, and that's the point I'm trying to make.
Okay.
Unless we have family members, friends that are actually directly involved, who cares if Whitey Bulge or Fleming kill someone? And that's how disgusting this country has become. When I see the Republic of Cambridge have a principal from a middle school and a soccer coach try to make excuses for this immigrant from Ethiopia, he's not talking about a roommate that held up a liquor store and didn't kill anybody and stole some booze.
You're talking
and
about
money.
the friend from UMass Dartmouth? Who's
Yes, why
I hadn't heard
isn't he
that.
being held more accountable? This is an act of terrorism in which people have been murdered and people have lost legs and arms. He's not covering up, his friend stealing books out of the bookstore.
This is the one of the three, just so that people are clear, this is the one of the three young men who were arrested, and he's the one who's out at home confinement, not for trying to destroy evidence, but for having lied to the police 3 times before he finally came clean. But go ahead.
Yeah, in other words, say I'm a Sumo guy and a guy from Charlestown does an armored car, and they catch me lying, I'm locked up now.
Mm. Well, he's got big problems. Let me just tell you, even though he's in his house, he's not home free here at all. Paul, thank you so much for the call. 877-301-8970 is our number.
You know what? One thing though that kind of was chilling what the governor said when he was talking about the dragnet for Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, and if we applied those kind of resources every time there is one of these, horrible, grisly murders in Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, we could find the people. And, whether I call it terrorism or not, I mean, we don't put the same kind of resources because it's every day. It's just every day, and you can't apply it every day. This was not an everyday crime.
Well, you know why we don't put? I would argue that the other reason is because almost everybody who's in the power structure in this state could say to themselves, like you said a while ago, I could have been on Boylston Street on April 15th. Most people don't say to themselves, well, I could have been on that corner in Roxbury where that kid was shot. So it's sort of the mindset, I think, in a lot of people, and I don't think it's intentionally heartless, is it's them as opposed to Marathon Monday was us.
Or there's
could have been us.
intentional risky behavior as opposed to people going to the end game, the finish line of the marathon, and not intentionally taking risks.
Yeah, but the two examples that come to mind quickly, and I know you'll agree with this, the governor mentioned Kim Odom, who's the mother of Stephen Odom, the little boy who was shot down doing nothing. I think he was carrying a basketball or whatever. Louis D. Brown, who was the son of Tina Cherry, who was with us yesterday from the Mother's Day March for Peace on Sunday. He was going pre-Christmas, well, I don't know what the name of the meeting was, to a meeting of a peace organization,
No, I know,
and he's gunned down. So
the preponderance of murders in those communities are committed by people who are targeting people for a specific reason.
You're saying, yeah, I agree with that. But the reality is you can protect a lot of those people. If there was a comparable sort of presence, and I understand the real world just like you're describing it, then I would assume that those would be safer communities too. Let's go back to the phones. We are going to the Cape with Mike. Mike, you are next on Boston Public Radio. Thanks so much for the call.
I'm just a retired police officer. Word gets around. It hasn't come out yet, and I'm sure it's going to, that this comes directly from a Boston police officer who was involved at the boat, that the FBI were following the two brothers, never told anybody, and lost them. They also have information.
Wait, you mean on Marathon Day, or you mean in general?
No, after the bombing.
Oh, okay.
After the bombing, and they never told the other police officers and were following them. You have to ask, this is the question I pose to everybody. Who identified those two brothers? Nobody's come forward and saying they identified them. My bet, I would bet my week's salary, that those FBI agents saw the faces and said, uh-oh. Then they went out and they didn't tell anybody. And this is coming directly from a Boston police officer that was at the boat, involved directly with this
We hear
investigation.
you. We hear you.
And those guys can't talk because it's against their rules and regulations.
Yeah, Mike, I have to. I hear you, and I'm not quarreling with what you were told, but I have to say, in this kind of case, the notion that could have happened and we would not have heard it through a leak from somebody makes it a little less credible for me. Not you, but the underlying story. Mike, thank you for the call. But one of the reasons why there's wild speculation about everything is they don't answer the questions.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And are they afraid of blowing their case? What's the issue?
But that's BS. With all due respect to blowing their case, as I said to you, you do a press conference that's as long as the media wants, and every time you're worried about blowing your case, I can't answer the question. It isn't like you can force them to. Well, maybe they wouldn't, but there are a lot of questions they would. I mean, is some of the issues we've raised today, some of the issues you raised with the governor about the video. I mean, it's just, it seems to me that when the public is attacked like it was so grossly and violently on September 5th, on April 15th, the public is entitled to a lot of information.
This one's a little weak. If they were tailing them right after the bombing, I mean, like instantaneously, then they would have gone to their house because that's where they went.
Right, because people knew where Tsarnaev lived. That's a very fine point. Let's try to squeeze in a couple of more quick ones if we can. Tom, you're in Boston. You're next on Boston Public Radio. Hey there.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Pleasure.
Just curious about, why the media in general, portrays this guy's wife by her maiden name. Why you guys don't call her
Tsarnaev?
By Tsarnaev, yeah. It just seems like, not you specifically, but the media in general.
I've done it too.
Propagated narrative.
Did she go by Tsarnaev?
That's my answer to your question.
So, yeah,
I don't know what the answer is. But if your concern is if you're the place you're going, Tom, and I think it's fine to go there, is the media consciously using a different last name for her in an attempt to not associate her with the family? I can tell you on both of our behalves, it's not intentional at all. Neither of us knew.
I don't even know if she went by Tsarnaev.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes I guess it's kind of presumptuous, but I
think we're all very skeptical of her and what she knew and what she did. You can't be living with a terrorist and not know he's in the basement cooking up a bomb.
Yeah.
And also, Tom, thanks for the call. She also the development on that front, which we have ignored because they're much more pressing.
She just hired some big terrorist lawyer.
Which again is not a sign
terrorist specialist, we should say.
of guilt. Because if I were in her situation, I might do the same thing. But it does at least raise questions.
Yes.
Yeah. One last. We can only do one more quick one. Where are we going? Very quickly. Sheila Norton, you have literally 30 seconds. Go.
Oh, you know what? I guess since it's a small amount of time, I want to thank you, Emily, for reading the Mark statement. I had just spoken to someone today. We were all sort of wondering how they were doing, and I think we should all keep them in our minds and our hearts. I just think of all of the tragedies that just seem so insurmountable for that father.
Yeah.
And I had actually heard where she might have lost the second leg, and I think from your statement or his statement, it sounds at least that is not the case. And
so far,
it's not the case. So,
Sheila, we got to go. I think your sentiments are everybody's sentiments. Emily, thanks.
All right, Jim.
Now you're back tomorrow at Open Mic at 1 o'clock. Marjorie's off one more day. Sue O'Connell from Bay Windows is going to co-host the whole deal. Chris Lydon, who's supposed to talk about bicycles today, is going to talk about bicycles tomorrow. And on the Friday news quiz, listen to this lineup: beer versus wine. Rich Doyle, he's the co-founder of Harpoon, versus Boston Wine School's Jonathan Alsop. That should be a pretty good one. Yeah, it should be. Thanks for listening to our show today, and we thank the governor for spending an hour with us. He's with us every single second Thursday of every month. We hope you're here tomorrow as well. You can follow us around the clock at WGBHnews.org. You can tweet us at BOS Public Radio. I am Jim Browdy. She is Emily Rooney. We'll see you tomorrow at noon. Bye.